All right, good morning, everybody. I'm Chad. I get to be the lead pastor here, and we're going to be talking about Leviticus today. Let's go. No. Leviticus, come on. Okay, there we go. Before we start, we're going to be in chapter 16, so if you want to turn there, please do that. Brian and someone else, they're bringing out a door, and that's going to help us with Leviticus. But before we do that, I want to say something that's not connected to the message at all, but it's connected to doors, because I need to get the feels out. When is the last time any of you, no, we can't do that. How many of you have been doorbell ditched in the last 6 months? Raise your hand. Right? Okay, so I want you to know something. The Ladera e-bike gangs are real. They're powerful. They are actually, let's go this way with it and just put it at an angle a little bit. Just put the foot right here and angle a little bit. They're real, they're powerful, they're relentless. And we live on a corner, so it's unbelievable how often we've gotten doorbell ditched. Jen was here first service. She's not having it. She literally hides behind windows, and I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, I'm going to get him. I'm like, what do you mean by that? Like, they're sixth graders. Like, what are you thinking of doing? I have gone total old man. I have no patience, and the Lord's like, do you know how much worse you were than them? And I'm like, I know, but look at them. Anyway, I'm supposed to love my enemies, and I have enemies in Ladera, and they are the e-bike gangs. That's a struggle. Okay, now let's do Leviticus. We're going to talk about forgiveness and the Day of Atonement. Something specific that we're going to talk about. So the Day of Atonement, also known as Yom Kippur, that was the day in Israel's calendar that everything was forgiven and there was a restart. So we've had a bunch of landmines over the series going, okay, well, all the offerings we've done that we had in our book, right? The guilt offering, the grain offering, the wave offering, the sin offering. What if they missed something, or what if they forgot a sin, or what if they hid one? The Day of Atonement takes care of everything, right? So throughout the year, God made a way for Israel to be right with him, but this is the day, it was like, this is a reset. It's the year of Jubilee for sins. It's like, this is it right here. That had everything to do with his presence, because on the Day of Atonement, one person from the priesthood, the high priest, one time a year got to go behind the curtain, the Holy of Holies. And that's where the door comes in. This will be our metaphor for the curtain. It's closed. One time a year it was open. And we want to talk about what was it like leading up to there, but very specifically, as one person one time a year was actually going to be in whatever it meant at that time, the presence of God. What was everybody thinking about that? Like, what did that mean? And then eventually, how does that, when we talk about being in the presence of God, like, what does that mean today? So how has this changed? How is it different? And what does Jesus have to say about it? So first, we're not going to go all the way back to the beginning about what it meant to be in the presence of God, but we're going to start with just Israel's timeline as far as their leadership and Moses and what their understanding would have been in recent time. So starting with Moses, we could put the burning bush up there. Moses' introduction to communing with God and having this relationship when he was leading Israel starts with the burning bush. Now, is that God? Everybody say no. Everybody say no. Is that God? No, he's not a burning bush. But we don't know what it looked like, how big it was. What we're told is that there was this bush that was on fire and didn't burn up, and then God's voice was there. So that is clearly not God. He's probably bigger than that. He looks different than that, but it was him going, here's an example of what it's like to be in my presence, meaning it's other, it's different, it's holy. And in fact, the thing he says first, he says, take off your sandals, for the place you're standing is holy ground. And then he speaks. And so Moses' first understanding is this mysterious, like, I don't know quite what to do with this. As Moses continues to lead Israel as they come out of Egypt, and that's another piece of, like, what's God like? Well, he rivals other gods on purpose by sending plagues and literally turning the lights off in the sky. And he's powerful and he's different than everything else. But those plagues weren't God either. That's him just going, I'm in control of everything, and I'm choosing to have you guys follow me. So Moses continues to follow, and we know that in Israel, we know that they had a lot of up and down relationship with God like we do, right? And there's a time where they were so on their own and wanting to do their own thing, even after seeing the glory of God, which again is like us. We've seen the glory of God in our life, and they were like, I don't know. And so God goes, okay, go ahead. Go on your own. I'm not coming. And then Moses is like, no, 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 no. We can't do it this way. So today, as we talk about God's presence, we're going to talk about boldness and confidence. Notice how Moses has seen the glory of God. He's seen his power, but he's not scared. How do those go to, how are you 100% like he could smite us right now? And wait, God, hold on one second. Like David has that relationship, right? There's a model. David's like, he's amazing, he's majestic, he's this and that, but help me out here. Why is this going on like this? How can it be 100% of both? Well, that's following God. Often there's things that don't seem like they can both go together at the same time, and yet they do. So Moses he's like, hey, your presence is what makes us different. Like we don't make us different. Our behaviors don't make us different. Yes, you're calling us to stand out, but we're supposed to stand out to point to you. If you're not here, there's nothing to point to, and this is empty. Like, you're the whole reason we're different. The whole reason that someone today who follows Jesus is different is not because of our behaviors. It's not because of our clean life and we don't cuss. It's because of the presence of God. It's because of his power. It's because of what he does. We're supposed to be conduits of that and lights how imperfect that we are. So God's like, well, I'm not coming with you guys. Not like a kid, but he's like, hey, listen, go see what it's like on your own, prodigal sons. And so Exodus 33:15. Then Moses says to God, if your presence doesn't go with us, don't send us up from here. How will anyone know that you're pleased with me and your people unless you go with us? What else will distinguish me and your people from the other people on the face of the earth? Nothing. And so Moses, I'm going to ask a question for him. How will we fulfill what you told us to do? We're supposed to be blessed to be a blessing. If you're not here, there's nothing to bless people with. What are we supposed to do? So God, in his relational way that he still does, goes, okay, I hear you. Let's go. And then Moses, who's even more bold, drop down to verse 18. Then Moses said, now show me your glory. I still want to ask Moses, like, what did you expect was going to happen? Like, you've seen what he can do. What do you want to see? Like, that feels dangerous. And God's like, yeah, Moses, that's going to be dangerous. We're not going to do it just like that. Let me show you a little bit of me. So that's literally what happens. And the Lord said, I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you. I will proclaim my name, the Lord, which is Yahweh, which means I am, in your presence. I will have mercy on whom I have mercy. I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion, meaning I make these types of decisions, and it's fair, and it's right, and it's good. But he said, you cannot see my face, for no one may see my face and live. Okay. Then the Lord said, there's a place near me where you can stand on a rock. When my glory passes by, I'll put you in a cleft of the rock, and I'll cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I'll remove my hand, and you will see my back, but my face must not be seen. Why? Because you will die. So I don't know what's going on here, you guys. This is nuts. Moses is just like, I've been with you. I want a little bit more. I want a little bit more. Like, let me see. Like, there's the burning bush, and there's this. But like, what are you like? Let me see you a little bit more. And God's like, well, I'll make the lights really bright or something. I don't think you can take the full thing. Like, literally, that's what he's doing. And Moses gets to somehow get a different picture, a different aspect of the diamond, but not the whole thing, because that won't work. Don't be confused on the face-to-face thing. Like, you can't see my face and live. But Moses is described as having a relationship with God as a friend talks to someone face-to-face. That's just a metaphor for their relationship. He never saw his face because clearly God's like, we can't do that. We can't do that. So Moses has had a few glimpses of his presence. Do you think Moses told anybody about this stuff? Yeah. Yes, for sure. And that word gets out, like when Moses was up on Mount Sinai and everybody was not patient, like does he tell, this is what it was like up there? So the legend of his presence, the sound of his presence is growing. In a huge way, let's put up the pillar of fire. So if you didn't remember, when they were with the traveling worship center, the tabernacle that we have a model of in the back, when that thing was wandering around the desert for 40 years, if you don't remember, every time that fire at night moved, and during the day it was a pillar of cloud, every time it moved, they had to pack up their tent and follow it, and whenever it stopped, they stopped and set up the traveling worship center again. Is that pillar of fire God? No. Is that pillar of fire God?
No.
No. I don't even know what it means other than God going, I'm with you. It's like at a mall when what do you call this? The spotlights. Like you could see it in the distance. Like, hey, there's something going on there. I don't know why this. Jen, stop it. But it's a beacon. Like that's not him. But he's saying, I'm with you. I'm with you. And here we go. I'm guessing it had to be huge. There were 2 million people who had to see it move. I don't know. The way we're wondering about it is probably how they wondered about it. Is that thing ever going to burn us? I don't know. I'd be asking all kinds of questions. When did it turn to fire? Was it at dusk? I don't know. But he's with us, and that makes us different. As long as that's here, he's with us. And then God said extra. He said, okay, and we could put up the photo of the tabernacle, not the photo of the drawing. So, if you haven't been with us, this is the center of the traveling worship center. And that first part is called the holy place. That second part that's smaller with the ark in the back is called the most holy place, or the Holy of Holies. There is a curtain that separates those two things, and that's what's really important because that's the thing that says closed. You cannot come in here. That curtain was a closed door. No one can come in here except for one priest one time a year. So, but over the ark, God told them, build this tabernacle, set everything up, and then my presence is going to be right there above the ark. Was that God, or was that all of God? Was that God? No, he's way bigger than that, right? What does that even mean? It just means there's something there, either, and we're going to talk about this, either the sound or the look or the sense or that's going to let you know that I'm there and I'm with you. And the fact that only one person can come one time a year, and this is what we talked about, shows you that I'm set apart, I'm different. I'm different than the other gods, and I'm training you how to be different so that you can be a light. All of this is a training and trust exercise, all of it. So he said, I'm going to be there one time a year. So as this traveling worship center gets set up, that and all the courtyard and all the things we've talked about, there is a ceremony where God comes and his presence fills the space. They can tell that he's there. It's sights, it sounds like he's here. And do you remember, who remembers what they do? The whole community does what? Oh, for goodness sake. You know what happened? Yes, thank you. Lori, do it again. Yes, they fell on their face because of fear? No, because of, thank you, because of joy. Because they were saying to each other, this worked. I guess we set it up right. He's here. This is different. We're set apart. He's with us, we did it right. And then God has to teach him a really hard lesson because Aaron's the high priest, 2 of his sons come and they offer unauthorized fire, which basically just means they did something that was outside of what God had asked them to do, and they fall down dead. We talked about a few weeks ago. We talked about it. We talked about what it means, what it doesn't mean, what does that mean for now, all that kind of stuff. But basically, for this time, this was a huge lesson, God going, I am with you, and I am here, but don't forget that I'm set apart and I'm holy. It is good for you to remember that you can't just do whatever you want in my presence. You cannot. So, the first thing he says is to Moses, to Aaron. So, through Moses to Aaron. So, look at chapter 16, verse 2. So, after all of that, after the presence, after the history of his presence, the 2 sons fall down and die, and then God says to Moses, tell your brother Aaron that he's not to come whenever he chooses into the most holy place behind the curtain in front of the atonement cover of the ark, or else he will die. So you could put up the picture of the tabernacle again. So tell Aaron, that back room, you can't come in there whenever you want. You're the high priest and you cannot do it. So then God's explanation is the Day of Atonement. So now he's going to go on to explain, here's when you can come. I want to explain to you it's one time a year. This is for forgiveness for the whole nation, and there's a process. But one time a year, look how clever this is. One time a year it's open, but just for you, nobody else. But here's what I want you to do on that day. So let me walk you through it. Read chapter 16. It's all these details, but here's the overview. Aaron first got himself ready. He first made a sacrifice atonement for himself to be ready for the duties. And there were 4 animals involved. So after he does it, there's a bull, there's a ram, and then there's 2 goats. So the first thing he does is he casts lots, which is like holy dice. You literally and God spoke to them through that. I'm glad we don't have that anymore because sometimes it's hard to hear from God, but that just feels like an 8-ball or something. But he used it. And so they cast lots to find out which one of the two goats was going to be the scapegoat. Does that term sound familiar? This is where it comes from, right here. Now, next week, Brian is going to talk all about the scapegoat. We're doing Atonement Part 1 today, Atonement Part 2 next week. It deserves it because of how much this ties into Jesus, our day, Good Friday, Easter. All the New Testament writers agree, this is the whole thing. So just as a preview, one of those are going to be the scapegoat. That one stays alive. The other one's going to be killed. And so here's what happens. Aaron then slaughters the bull, and he takes some of the blood from the bull back into that most holy place, and he sprinkles it in front of the altar and on the cover of Atonement. By the way, Atonement, think about it this way, at-one-ment. Atonement, at-one-ment, back together again. The Day of Atonement, back together again. That's kind of what we're talking about. Reconciliation, atonement, similar. Then he comes back out. He slaughters the goat, not the live one, but the one not the scapegoat, but he slaughters that, takes some of the blood, brings it back into the most holy place, does the same thing, splashes some of the blood, sprinkles it in front of the altar, and on the top of the altar, the atonement cover. Then he comes back out. He changes his clothes, and then he puts his hands on the scapegoat. Oh, sorry. First, he puts his hands on the altar with some of the blood of the goat and some of the blood of the bull. This is back out in the courtyard now, and he puts some of it on each of the horns, and remember that symbolizes power where that altar is out front. Then after that, he takes both of his hands and he puts it on the scapegoat. And with his hands on the scapegoat, as a symbol of transferring the sins of Israel to this goat, does this sound familiar at all right now? He confesses all the sins of Israel on the goat's head. All of our sins, all of our wrongdoing, all the things that we missed, all the things we hid this year that we didn't quite make atonement for, God is now going to transfer them to the goat, and that goat is taken out into the wilderness, way out, and it's let go. Like Jesus up on the cross, way out in the wilderness, taking our sins on him. So he finishes that, he comes back, and then he slaughters the ram to make atonement for he and the people. After that, the bull and the ram are taken outside the camp, and they're burned, and the person who did that has to wash before they can come back into the camp. And then the person who led the scapegoat out there, that feels like a big job. Right? If you're that person, do you want that to get on? Is this going to get on me? What am I doing with the goat? I just have all these questions. They have to wash and bathe before they can come back into the camp, and then it's over. So that is the one day a year where it's open just for a little while for one person, and that's all the stuff that surrounds it. So here's what I want to ask you. I want to have a little bit of discussion. Leading up to that day, so they would have known what was going on. Hey, this is what this is going to be for. This is for forgiveness. This is for atonement. And here's all the things that have to happen. What were they thinking? What are the emotions they would have had leading up to that day? Probably not everybody. There's some squirrely people, but if you really were paying attention, what are some of the emotions they would have had? Let's hear. Busted. Sure. Yeah. What else? Knowing our history and them and God, what else would they have been thinking up leading up to that day? The night before, hey, tomorrow's the Day of Atonement. Anything else? What other emotions? Excitement. I'm a terrible sinner. Yes, all of the things. I'd be really nervous. Knowing what I know about God's presence, we can't make a mistake. Aaron, you can't make a mistake. Think about all the things that would go through your mind. And what about when Aaron's in there? No one else, by the way, that usually the priests were allowed in that first room. No one was allowed in there at all when Aaron was in the most holy place. No one has any clue what's going on. We don't know how long it took. Everything I just described takes a long time. So if you're not a Levite and you're not even close to the camp, you're probably going, has anyone heard yet? What about the first time they had the Day of Atonement? Think about them going, is he back? Where's the fire? Are we dead? And think about all this stuff, his presence. This is such a big deal. We can't die today. And then what about when Aaron comes back out and he's like, what would you have asked him? For real. Aaron comes back out. What would you ask Aaron when he's done with all that and he finally comes back out? What would you ask him? What was it? Are you good? Yeah. What did his face look like? Was he like, yes. What did you see? What else? Are you okay? What did you hear? What was going on? What's it like? Is it like the fire? Why is it so small? I don't know. Such a big deal. The Day of Atonement. The day. Here's a quote that was helpful to me, just describing the gravity of the day. The ritual of the day had one view, one goal, to avert the wrath of God for the sins of the past year and to ensure his continued dwelling among them. The shedding of blood and the sending off of the scapegoat were meant to cleanse the nation, the priesthood, and the sanctuary from sin. The entire meaning of the sacrificial system reached its climax, and the day has been well called the Good Friday of the Old Testament. This heaviness, this practice, this understanding of his presence that travels around with them in the traveling worship center for 40 years in the desert. And then it finds its semi-permanent place in Jerusalem. So that traveling tabernacle is there for a little while until David's son Solomon builds the temple. Okay, so let's put up the temple. So this is not it. This would be a model. I want to show you the scope of this. So this whole courtyard, this is on the Temple Mount. It's up high. They had to travel up to Jerusalem, all the stuff that Carly talked about. The structure of this, as far as the outline, the perimeters, is exactly like the traveling tabernacle. It's just bigger and it's more grandiose. Huge. So next picture. So if you look, see the gold doors? Anyone? Well, can you say something? Like, I don't even know if you're with me. Do you see the gold doors? Yes. Okay, so the gold doors are where you enter that first holy place. Okay? Then let's look at the next picture. After you go there, so that the gold doors are on the front there, and then you go into the holy place, and you see the giant curtain, right? Sharonda, let me move. So then there's the giant curtain, and then a little room in the back, that's still the Holy of Holies. That's where the ark would have been. You follow me? So it's just like the one before. Although it's huge, it's way bigger. So look at you probably can't see. In front of that curtain is a person. So the curtain in the traveling tabernacle was about 15 feet high, and that was about as high as this ceiling right here, which is still like, okay, but they had to set it up and tear it down. This one's 60 feet high. 15 feet high to 60 feet high. What does that symbolize if you're like, okay, we put this in place and that thing got bigger? I don't know, like, what does that mean to you? What does it symbolize? Don't go in there. It's really big now or something. Like, oh my gosh, like, don't do it. We don't know, but there are legends about how thick that curtain was. Again, 60 feet high. Let's take a look at the picture of the American flag. That's the actual size of the curtain. 60 feet high by 30 feet wide. Can you see the people at the bottom? Yeah. Okay. Just for a second, I want to talk about politics and who we should vote for. I found this because it was the size. Everybody chill. No landmines. We're not doing that right now. Not for politics. That's the size. That's the size of it. There's legends about how they cleaned it. It's like 200 or 300 priests it took to clean it. It was a handbreadth thick. We don't know if that's an inch or 4 inches. Handbreadth, like that's all we know. But none of that's in Scripture. It's just legends, and a guy named Josephus, who was a Jewish historian after in the 1st and 2nd century, he writes about it. So it was huge, it was thick, it was grandiose. All of that stuff matters for the symbolism, but it matters even more for what happens next. So Jesus grew up in this culture. We know he was a good Jewish boy. He did everything he was supposed to do. He followed the law perfectly. He and his family he and Mary and Joseph, they went to festivals that Carly was mentioning last week. They went to Passover. They did all the stuff. They brought offerings. So this was their reality. And then when Jesus is 30 years old, for about 3 years, he starts his public ministry. And he sees fit to start talking against what this has turned into. We've talked about it before, but the leadership and the people of Israel, instead of this helping their relationship with God and helping them to be a light to the rest of the nations, going, let us introduce you to him, they started having a relationship with the rules. They started to feel good about themselves if they followed the rules really well and feel badly if they didn't. And they were esteemed if they followed them well and looked down upon if they followed them poorly. And none of it had to do with forgiveness anymore. It had to do with elitism. And it had to do with, look at us, we're the leaders. And so Jesus starts speaking against that, saying, we're changing the whole thing. This is not what was intended from the beginning. I'm going to tear this whole thing down. this has to be about the heart. All of this stuff was made for you, to be in relationship with me. I don't want your blind animals. I don't want you comparing each other. I want a heart that's fully submitted to me. And this system was never meant to be perfect. It was supposed to point to someone, and that someone is me. And this temple's going to rise again after 3 days, and we're going to change the whole thing. He had these words, but nobody understood what he was talking about. Resurrection wasn't a thing in the culture at all, even in fiction. People would have never understood. They expected a resurrection of everybody who was faithful at the end of time when God came back and everything was made new. It would have never entered their mind that one person in the middle of time was going to be raised from the grave. They just didn't understand any of this. So stuff had to happen to get their attention. So let's turn to Matthew 27. So Jesus, right before this, Jesus has breathed his last breath, and he prays to the Father, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit," and he dies. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. If you've never heard that, that's that 60-foot curtain that was really thick and really huge, and no person could possibly reach that to tear it. If they could, they couldn't tear it anyway. God was getting people's attention. One of the quotes I read said, "In a stroke of divine irony, the only likely observers of the curtain tearing would have been priests tending to the evening sacrifices in the holy place." They witnessed the undoing of their vocation as the man they rejected was sacrificed outside the city. But that wasn't it. Next moment in verse 51, the earth shook. There's an earthquake. The rocks split and the tombs broke open. The bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. Can everyone say landmine at once? Landmine. Do it again. Landmine. Yeah, this is crazy. They came out of the tombs after Jesus' resurrection, so not in that moment, but after his resurrection, went into the holy city and appeared to many people. No one knows what's going on here. Scholars don't know. It's just like, okay. Something happened with life and death that was crazy. The magnitude of him breathing his last breath as God on earth made the earth shake. The whole thing it's like the earth's going, no! Like, rocks split, tombs break open, the curtain tears. Like, it wasn't just one thing. It was like this shock wave of Jesus' power just went, and stuff couldn't handle it. God had to tell, like, I am telling you guys, something is happening. And he hadn't even risen from the grave yet. It's just his death. The sky goes dark. We don't know what everyone was thinking. I want to go take a survey and go, when the earthquake happened, did you, and then it's the telephone game. We're like, was that right when he died? Like, what do you mean? Like, guys. But we do know one of the conversations in verse 54. When the centurion, who's a Roman guard in charge of at least 100 people, was in charge of killing people, they were very good at it. They were loyal to Rome. If people weren't killed properly, they would be killed. All the loyalties. When the centurion and those who were with him were guarding Jesus, they saw the earthquake and all that happened. So all the things, they were terrified, and they exclaimed, "Surely he was the Son of God." Okay. And he hadn't risen from the grave yet. He hadn't even done the thing. There wasn't even any proof that he wasn't just a failed Messiah, other than obviously all the natural disasters that were happening. I don't know if we think about this often enough. We go past Good Friday and Easter, and we're like, this stuff happened. Like, the reason we know about it is because it was so cataclysmic in culture and society. Like, at that moment in time, things happened over and over that no one could explain, and it got passed on, and that's why we're sitting into the room. The writers of the New Testament, all of them, understood that moment to be directly tied to Leviticus, to the curtain. We've read Hebrews 10. I want to read it again in light of what we just heard. Therefore, brothers and sisters, since we have confidence to enter the most holy place by the blood of Jesus, that alone, like, think if you're a Jewish person that's lived in both of those sections of time. We can enter the most holy place. Okay. Like, what? We can enter the most holy place with confidence. Not creep in. Enter there with confidence. Why? I don't know. Where's the verse? The most holy place by the blood of Jesus, by a new and living way open for us through the curtain, the veil, the curtain that is his body. The veil and the curtain, the same thing. The thing that allows us to be in God's presence was the tearing of Jesus' body. His body was broken. That allows us in. That opened the curtain. He dies. The curtain tears going, do you see? This is the only way in. There had to be a perfect sacrifice. The high priest took care of the sacrifice himself. He's the administrator of the sacrifice. He's prophet, priest, king all at once, and he lays his life down, and now you can go in whenever you want. And since we have a great high priest over the house of God, let us draw near to God. On the opposite end of the spectrum, the old way, tell your brother Aaron that he cannot come into the most holy place whenever he wants. He cannot do that. And now it's draw near to God with a sincere heart and full assurance that faith brings. You guys, none of these examples, the door and another examples I'm going to give, none of them work perfectly. They all just kind of go, okay, I guess it's like this. I'm thinking like the door's open, you can come whenever you want. There's this all access pass, right? Like there's no barriers anymore, that kind of stuff. And then we talk about that. We can talk to God whenever we want. And I think about his reaction to all of that, right? And so the first thing I thought of was my kids. So if you're not a father or a mother, like this example will still make sense as far as priority, right? So I have meetings throughout the week. Some seem more important than others. There's pastoral meetings, there's organizational Oak House stuff and all that. If I see one of my kids' names come up on my phone, what do? Give me a second. Just like that. Doesn't matter what it is. It's like, and I maybe have to call him back, whatever, but like, yeah, okay, got it. I'm super pumped whenever they call. If it's like, hey, I need help with this, I need you, like whatever, that's all great for me. But when they call and they're like, hey, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, we're just talking? Like, you just wanted to hang out? Like, I'm so needy. It's so needy. This is where it falls down. God's not needy. He's not like, please talk to me, please talk to me. Like, he's not like that. He doesn't have that kind of brokenness. But the thing of us just going, talk to him right now. Well, how does he have all the phone lines? I don't know. Talk to him whenever you want. All access pass. Yes. Yeah, what do you got?
So was the tabernacle just a flawed system from the start?
Yes. Read Hebrews this week. He said, the question was the tabernacle a flawed system from the start? Yes, and the Bible attests to that fact. It says it was a shadow of the things to come, and it was just supposed to point the entire time, there has to be another answer. Like, and Hebrews says, the blood of bulls and goats could never take away sin. And it says the high priest had to keep offering the same sacrifice over and over and over. It was like this rat race. We just can't do it. And so Jesus comes and goes, there's only one way. So it was always pointing to him. Well, why didn't he start that way? Well, that's a whole other conversation. I don't know. But yeah, it was always it was flawed and always supposed to point to Jesus. Always. And everybody knew that in hindsight. Okay. I just want to ask a few questions about how you come to God. This door is not a great example. It's flawed in all kinds of ways, all that kind of stuff. But I want to use it as an example of when you spend time with God. And all I mean by that, maybe there's a bunch of different, like it could be scripture mapping. By the way, I practice scripture mapping when I prepare for a message. Like, she does that on a daily basis. That is insane. Or you've never talked to God. You never tried to talk to God. You don't know Jesus. You don't know church stuff. You're not even sure why you want to be here, or you're watching online. All of it's the same. Like, when you choose to listen to God or communicate with him or go, okay, I guess I'm here, that's what I'm talking about. So how do you do that? What are you thinking when it's time for that? So if this is like, okay, I'm gonna talk to him, I'm gonna go inside the door, what do you feel like beforehand? Do you feel nervous? Do you feel like you don't deserve to do that? Like, do you stand outside the office and go, okay, I'm in line with a bunch of people, like, so I'm like seventh in line, and I'll just wait. If he gets to me, he gets to me. Like, I don't know, he probably doesn't want to talk to me. I'll just wait, and if Kimmy Finley's probably going to go in there because she's super holy, and then, I don't know, she can tell me what happened. But, like, do you rely on other people going, what was it like? What's it like? Like, what's your time with God? Like, I don't really do that, but, like, Do you talk to the crowd out here? Are you more comfortable with a group date? This is great. This group date is awesome. All of our voices together. But if you don't ever feel comfortable, go to him. I think God has something else for you today. Yeah. Just you. Yeah. He just wants to be with you. Yeah. He loves you so much. And there's all this stuff that makes us think I probably can't because of the things I did in my past, because of the things I did yesterday, or when I go in, I'm going to say the same thing again. There's no way he wants that. He doesn't want me to say that again. All this stuff. Or do we come in and we go, I'm just going to stand in line with I've got my resume. Or the day-to-day thing would be more like my report card, like how I've done with my spiritual habits. Guys, I still do this all the time. Like, I know better, and I'm still like, it wasn't that great of a week, and I have to talk myself out of my flesh back into the spirit. I go, no, that's not what he does. And sometimes we go, okay, I'll just... There we go, I wonder... maybe he'll open it. Maybe he'll talk to me, I don't know. There's a song by Lauren Daigle that sums up how I feel sometimes, and maybe for you. When the best of me is barely breathing, when I'm not somebody I believe in, hold on to me. There's a bunch of times when I don't believe in me enough to go, there's no way he'd want to hang out with me. There's no way. He's like, it's not the resume Jesus crumbled up on the cross, and it's so hard for me to remember that. When I don't feel like I'm worth defending, when I'm tired of all my pretending, hold on to me. Have you ever felt like you're not worth defending? Anybody? Yeah, I have a lot. When you go into the room, is it a... hello? That's not what Hebrews says. The book of Hebrews says, enter with boldness and confidence. What does that look like? Hey! I don't know. A couple problems with that is entering with boldness and confidence like a little kid would be, you would probably run. You wouldn't walk in? Dad! Literally, that's what it would look like. The word for boldness in that passage actually means free and fearless confidence, cheerful courage. So here's the problem with all this stuff, is this says that there's still an in and out, and that there's still a door, and this doesn't exist anymore. This is gone. This is gone. This is gone. There's no more door. There's no entrance you have to figure out to. You don't wait in line for anybody. Because here's the greatest thing, we don't enter with boldness and confidence because we're not going to be killed again. We don't enter with boldness and confidence because Jesus made a way for you not to be killed when you go in the presence of God. That's not why we enter with confidence. We enter with confidence because we were invited. That's the difference. He takes the curtain, he did it. It was his move. Jesus dies on the cross of his own will. The curtain is torn, and instead of us getting to go in, think about the day of Pentecost. It's like God came out, right? We don't enter into somewhere. There's no church that's the presence of God church. There's no pastor that's the presence of God pastor. That's Day of Atonement stuff. It's everybody from all walks of life, every color, every sin that you've committed. It's like there is no more tabernacle. He's available to you, to talk to you, to walk with you, no matter what you've done, no matter where you've come from. This doesn't even exist anymore, so we don't wait in line for anybody. And if there were a line, he'd call you back. He'd be like, hey, Hannah, come here. Right? He's the dad. Chad, come here, my boy. It's so hard for me to say that and believe he's like that, but it's more. If I can think that as a sinful human, it's more. He calls your name, he yells, he's like, oh my gosh, yes, let's go. I don't care if you're saying the same thing again. I just want to be with you. I've said this before, but my kids growing up so many times, and again, if you're not a parent, it'll still transfer. My kids growing up so many times, I would have already heard what happened in their day or the week from Jen. And they get in the car to go to school. I'm like, hey, how's it going? They start telling me the story. Do I stop them? No. It's like, I just want to hang out. Tell me more. Let me hear it. Let me hear it again. I'm not here for the information. My gosh. He's not here for your information. You can't tell him anything that's going to help him. He just wants you to be with him. That's why Jesus is like, hey, you don't have to say a bunch of words. Like, just go in secret and be with your Father and, like, just hang out with him. Just be with him. And if you've never done that, band, you guys come up. If you've never done that before, again, this also isn't the presence of God service where it's like, ooh, if you were here that day, the presence of God came. No, we're talking about what is the existence of a Christian. So during worship, during response, during the time of music right now, what we usually do is we go, hey, what's God doing? Keep speaking to him about that. Keep talking to him. Is he causing you to well up with joy? Is he causing you to feel pain? Is he calling you close and he wants to say son or daughter to you? Like, what's he doing? Just follow that. If you've never prayed before, just start talking to him like you talk to a friend and see what happens. I really mean that. But for all of us, if you're a Christian, I'd love for you to take communion. If you're not at that place yet, then you can feel free to pass on this. But the crackers and juice are up here. And just take a cracker, dip it in the juice, and you can walk on. And maybe if you want to spend time at the cross, you can do that. But like we did last week, I'd love for you to enter in the back of the hallway and come down that hallway and come this way. So even if you're up here, go back around and pay attention to the "You're most welcome here" sign as you go down the hallway. This table, like, you can argue with that wall all you want, but Jesus will win. Let him win. Let him win. Let's take communion together and worship. Jesus, keep having your way. We love you. Amen.